Well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? You guys look like sad. Like, where's your smiles? Okay, so for those that don't know me, I am Mark J. Just Mark J. That's just me. I'm just Mark J. I am a member of the ELT team here at ICC, and with ELT, here's what's different about ICC compared to other churches. We know when you have the one pastor, one minister method at ICC, you typically hear one voice. And so when you hear one voice, you get accustomed to that one perspective from the person that is speaking. And oftentimes we hear the one voice and then we like, well, that pastor or that minister said that, so it must be right. And so you get accustomed to that one voice. And so you think like, well, if they said it, it must be true. And so I'm going to follow by what they said. But with ELT, with the ELT model that we have here at ICC, we have six. There's six of us. And we have a ministry rotation that we have between the six of us. And between the six of us, you hear six different voices, and you hear six different styles from those voices. My sister, Tamika, and I would say she's more of the fiery brimstone one of the group. She comes here on praise and worship, and she leads the worship, and then she gets to her message, and she delves deep, and she's the fiery one. And then Brother Sean, he is the more like he gets down into the scriptures and bring those out, and he brings it back to his own personal life and how it deals with him. Brother Joe and Sister Debbie, they are more, and this is just my own thinking, like I just kind of been watching everybody and everything. They are more of they're the heart of the group, you know what I mean? Sister Debbie's messages are usually, there's a reason why she usually ends up crying or about to cry during her message, because she's the heart, you know what I mean? And what she is saying is like truthful and is, down in her deep, in her soul, and she brings that out because she's the heart. And Brother Joe is the same way. He's the heart. Like a lot of his messages are about like forgiving and, just turning things around because it's the heart of the group. And then my wife, Minister Clarissa, she's the teacher. She teaches, that's her full-time job. She's an English teacher. And then when she gets behind the pulpit, she teaches there as well. So she's going to give you a perspective that's going to teach you something so that you can go back later was like, okay, I think I learned something today. And then there's me. I kind of was like, well, what do I do? And then I kind of realized it this morning, about 20 minutes before coming up here. I said, I think my way is to have you think outside of the box and think about something differently than what you've been accustomed to thinking about it before. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just different. And then maybe when you leave here today, you go, I think I'm going to do a little bit more research on this or this or this, because the way I've always heard it has been one way. Maybe I should think about it in a different way. And so that's how I'm coming today. I just want to have you think outside of the box just a little bit. Don't get mad at me. I'm not saying what I'm saying is right. I'm not saying what I'm saying is wrong. I'm just saying think about it differently. And with that in mind, the title of my message today is Jesus Woke? Now, I'm sure a lot of us here have heard the term, especially within the past about 5 years or so, the term woke. And then there's a lot of different perspectives of what it means for something or someone or a company to be woke. But what does the term woke really mean? You can walk down the street and ask somebody, what does woke mean? And they'll give you one definition. You go to another person, what does woke mean? They're going to give you another definition of it. And so it just depends on who you talk to about what the definition of the meaning of woke is. So let's dive back a little bit. Where did the term originally come from? A lot of people think it just started within the past 5 years, and that's just like a political thing to say something is woke or too woke or not woke or whatever. But that's actually not true. The original use of the term woke can be taken back to at least 1938 by a blues and folk musician named Leadbelly. If you know anything about folk music or blues music, you've heard of the name Leadbelly. And he talked about being woke after the end of a song that he created called the Scottsboro Boys. Now, if you don't know anything about what the Scottsboro Boys and the Scottsbury 9 situation is, that started back in, I don't have the exact date, but it was about 9 young black men who were placed on trial for assaulting a white woman. And if you delve back a little bit in history, you learn that that was a very important case in history because it kind of what led to having having a trial of mixed peers. That's what it was. It was a trial of mixed peers because when they were on trial, they were seen by an all-white jury, and they were immediately said to be guilty. And so it got appealed multiple times, and then they said there was an unfair jury. And there's a lot of historical context about that particular situation. But the song was entitled to say, at the end of the song, he says, y'all better stay woke when going to the South. Because the term woke was used by black African Americans to warn other African Americans about heading down south. Like, you better stay woke when you head down south because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. So stay woke, and so you don't get caught up in any type of situation. That was where the term originally came from. It was a warning, per se. And then the term continued to be used in the 70s, 80s, and 90s throughout various type of artists and musicians of the like. And it basically had the same meaning throughout the years. Don't sleep on what's happening around you. Stay woke. Then in 2014, during the protest in Ferguson, Missouri, the term became a hashtag on Twitter. And stay woke was used as a hashtag for telling people like, this group is organizing here, so stay woke, we're getting together as we organize on what we're gonna do. And it was after the Ferguson situation where the term really started to join the mainstream lexicon. And then it was after this time that the phrase started to enter the mainstream lexicon, and extreme groups on both sides have changed the meaning of the word. Media organizations started to use it as a catch-all term to include any sort of socially conscious topic. It was being used so much that the original usage and term of the phrase was basically meaningless. In 2017, the left started using the phrase as a term of enlightenment or staying aware. They would read a book or they would watch a movie about any sort of topic, and all of a sudden they became woke. Like, I watched this movie and my eyes are open, now I'm woke. And so they started walking around saying, oh, stay woke, stay woke, stay woke. Read a book, I read Curious George, stay woke. It was just used for everything to say, I read a book, I watched a movie, like nothing. And then around about 2020, the right started using the phrase into a negative connotation. It was used as an insult for various progressive or leftist movements or ideologies, perceived to be overzealous, performative, or insincere. Anything that was said or done that was opposite to their ideology was considered woke or woke propaganda. The use of this negative use started to be used in many iterations of media, such as in comic books, per se. Y'all know I like to read comic books all the time. And whenever a character, or you have they call them legacy characters, like your Supermans, your Spider-Mans, your Batman, those are considered legacy characters. Well, if they made a new character to follow in the place of the legacy character, but it was a different race or a different gender, they say, oh, that's just woke, that's just woke. Marvel is now woke because they have this female Captain America or whatever the case may be. You know, that's how they started using the term. A phrase that was originally used by African Americans as a warning to stay safe was now completely appropriated and changed to a word to demonize. So where does that leave us today? The woke propaganda crowd is very loud and very boisterous. Anything that's not fit the narrative is considered woke. CRT, LGBT community, race relations, immigration, women's rights, anything that deal with any type of social implication is now considered to be woke. You may have heard the phrase, go woke, go broke, because whenever a company or something does something, there's an immediate aftermath and everybody says they're going woke. And I see it so much in social media now that I typically ignore it because it's based on ignorance. Then I stumbled across an article just this past weekend in which a former Southern Baptist minister named Russell Moore remarked that he had multiple pastors tell him essentially the same story about quoting the Sermon on the Mount. And when preaching about it, turning the other cheek. And someone in their congregation would come up to them and say, well, where did you get those liberal ideas? And the ministers would say, I'm literally preaching the words out of Jesus Christ's mouth. And their response would be, yeah, that does not work now. That's too weak. So, has Jesus become woke?
Come on now.
So how can Jesus be woke? As mentioned earlier, the term woke, the way the term woke used is to say anything that does not benefit one particular group and caters to the downtrodden. Then this is exactly what Jesus is about. No one has ever cared more for the plight and suffering of others than Jesus. Jesus preached to love thy neighbor. Matthew 22, verses 37 and 39 says, and Jesus said unto him, thou shalt love thy Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. 38, Si? This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Period. That's all it says. 1 John chapter 4, verses 20 and 21. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother, whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God love his brother also. Leviticus chapter 19, verses 18 says, thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. Mark 12, verse number 31. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. 1 John 4:11 says, beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. And then Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. This says, and behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, what is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live. But he, the guy who asked the question, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, a certain man went from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among the thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked him, and passed on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him. And whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Next, 36. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? 37. You can't do 37? And he said, he that showed mercy on him. Then he said, Jesus unto him, go and do thou likewise. So, if we're supposed to take care of each other and look out for each other and do things for each other, is that extreme? I don't know, because this is exactly what Jesus said. Like, these are the words out of Jesus' mouth, to love thy neighbor as himself. Is that considered woke? And then Jesus also preached to turn the other cheek. Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 and 39. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, then turn to him the other also. Good gracious, hooked on phonics works for me. Romans chapter 12, verses 19. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 29 says, but I say unto you, which hear, love your enemies, do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, and pray for them that despitefully use you. And unto him that smiteth thee on the other cheek, after also the other, and him that taketh away thy cloak, forbid not to take away thy coat also. And then one more. Matthew chapter 5, verses 39. It says, but I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And then one more thing that Jesus preached about. Jesus preached about caring for the sick, the old, and the needy. Matthew chapter 25, verses 34 through 40. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye, blessed of thy Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when we saw thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked, or clothed thee? Because they was basically saying, Jesus, we ain't see you do all this. What are you talking about? Or when we saw thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. John chapter 13, verses 12 through 14. So after he had washed their feet, this is Jesus, after he had washed their feet, and he had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. Philippians 2, verses 3 through 4 says, Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem each other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. I hope you guys don't mind. I got a lot of verses today. I'm trying to back up everything that I'm saying. Romans chapter 15, verse 1. When then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Romans chapter 12, verses 13. Distributing to the necessity of saints, given to hospitality. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. One more. James chapter 5, verses 13 through 14. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. One thing that sort of gets missed in our society is there was a time back in the early years when schools and everything, before there was a separation of church and state, schools would have up the 10 Commandments. And so they would have the 10 Commandments up, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And that was, told to be, live your life by the 10 Commandments. But one thing always struck kind of odd with me is, the 10 Commandments, that was in the Old Testament of the Bible. And then if we were to go by Jesus' teaching, that would be the Beatitudes, or once again, the Sermon on the Mount. And so why don't we live our life in our society based on the Beatitudes as opposed to the 10 Commandments? Not saying that you still can't live by the 10 Commandments, but if we are to be there for each other and help each other in the way Jesus has expressed it, the Beatitudes is kind of the way we should be living our lives. So the Beatitudes starts in Matthew chapter 5, and it goes through verses 1 through 12. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. And then rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Jesus uses the Beatitudes to speak to a variety of listeners and to communicate several messages about the kingdom of heaven. Specifically, he makes a pronouncement about the kingdom to Israel as a whole. And at the same time, he gives instruction about the nature of kingdom life to his disciples. So, is Jesus awoke? I don't know. But, what did we say? We're just here to make you think a little bit. So, now, that was woke in terms of how the right uses it. But what about woke in terms the way the left uses it? As in, like I said, I read a book. Now I'm awake. Now I'm woke. Now everything is different. Well, let's look at it a little differently. Can we be biblically woke? Let's use it that way. If we were used the term woke as in awaken, then that means our minds and thoughts have been changed to think a way that we had not previously thought before. The Bible can be used to awaken us. Look at all of us in here. Everybody, just turn around for a quick second, just look at each other. Just give everybody just a quick glance, everybody that's here. All right. Here's one thing that we all have in common. None of us are here today the way we were before we walked in. All of us has a past. All of us have a history. All of us have gone through struggles. All of us have sinned. Every single last one of us have messed up in some kind of way. But it took the Bible to make us woke, if we use it in that term, to awaken us. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11 says, When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. We all had to grow up. At some point or another, we all had to grow up. We could not continue to live the way we had lived before. We had to change. And so that came in many different forms. Some of us came before we walked into a church before. We used other methods of changing our life. You know, we just like I used to do this thing and then I just quit it cold turkey. You know, you became woke. You quit it cold turkey. But you didn't have that biblical sense of the change. Some of us grew up in church. And then we grew up in church and we used to sing the little church songs that they sing, you know, when you're little kids and everything. And, you know, it's good to have that in you, but life didn't punch you in the face yet. Everything changes once life punches you in the face. And once you get punched in the face and then you get down and then you get back up and you kind of wipe that, you know, in the movies, it's always funny in a movie when like the superhero or something, they get punched and they get locked down and they all kind of wipe their chin. And it's like, that's like, oh, now I'm ready to do something. Well, we all had that moment where we had to wipe that little blood off our chin and we had to change something. And hopefully for a lot of us, we use the Bible to do that for us. An example of a person in the Bible who became woke is Saul. Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 13, tells the story of Saul and how he was going around and, you know, he was killing people. He was killing people for what they believed in and everything. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest me thou? Or why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he, trembling and astonished, said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul rose from the earth, and when his eyes opened, he saw no man. But they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And when he was 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias. Ananias. What you said. And to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias. And he said, Behold, I am here, Lord. And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarshish. For behold, he prayeth. So, blah, 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 blah. Saul became awakened from hearing from the Lord. How many of us have become awakened from hearing from the Lord? Saul became Paul and became a new person. He became awakened. He became woke. It's very easy for someone to fall into the trap of ideology and thinkings. But the one thing we need to remember to think is for ourselves. Do your own research. Half the things we see on social media are made up or completely false. Just because something is on the news does not mean it's true. Especially when it comes to the talking heads and the commentators. Those folks are paid to give their opinion. And we have all heard of the phrase of what an opinion is. There was a documentary, there's actually 2 documentaries that I watched that are on Netflix. They talk about the same thing, and I hadn't realized this before. One is called The Social Dilemma, and the other one is called The Great Hack. And what both documentaries are how social media can be used to influence our thinkings. Have you guys never heard of who's heard of an algorithm? You guys heard what the algorithm is? If you've never heard what the algorithm is how the social media they use what you like, they use what you view, they use what links you tap on. It gathers that information and it starts to show you similar things in those veins. So if you watched a video about, dogs, and let's say you watched a video about a dog, You ever notice that you keep scrolling, you start seeing more videos about dogs, and you start to see more and more? That's because it's reading what you're doing, and so it starts to feed you that, because social media has one job. This is their only job. Their job is to keep you looking at it. So they're going to keep showing you things to keep you looking at it. So if you start, whatever you start seeing, it's always around voting time. Voting time is when you really see an uptick in this, because whichever way you may lean, they're going to keep showing you things about that. But the things that they show you aren't always true. It's just because people in the same vein keep liking the same thing. So it says, well, 10,000 people like this, you must like this too. And so it's going to show you. So it's going to show you things whether they're true or not true. I highly recommend checking out The Social Dilemma or The Great Hack. They're a little long, but it was like, wow. So I looked at that and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch the things that I like and tap and all that stuff into, because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of being told what to think. I want to think for myself. So if I see something, I'm going to look at both sides of it to see my own opinion. That's what we all should be doing. We should be forming our own opinions about things. So, what does that have to do with everything that I'm talking about? Well, it has to do with everything I'm talking about because it goes back to how the word woke, how it was originally used. It was completely taken away, and there are two sides that have their own definition of what the word is. So we have to use our own mind and our own thinking to determine, is that right? Is that right? Is neither right? And just stay within your own opinion. So, was Jesus woke? It depends on what iteration of the word and definition you use it as. Even when I was researching this message, I Googled, is Jesus woke? And I found articles in that. And would you believe? There are two different views if Jesus is woke. It just depends on which side of the definition you're using the word for. One side says Jesus was woke because he did these things. The other side says Jesus was woke because of these things. But they're completely two different things. That's why it's important for us to think differently, think outside the box. But one thing Jesus did not do, Jesus did not pick or choose one side and only loved one side. Jesus loved everybody. Jesus sat with sinners. Jesus sat with saints. Jesus talked to and preached to everyone. So it didn't matter it didn't matter the person's race, religion, gender, breed, did not matter. Jesus talked to everybody. So whether you want to consider Jesus woke or not, it doesn't matter. If we want to be like Jesus, that's the first thing that we need to remember. We need to love and look after everyone. We can't just love and look after the people that look like us. We can't just love and look after the people that think like us. We can't just love and look after the people because they're American. We can't just love and look after, we have to love and look after everyone. And to some people, they would consider that to be woke. That's it. I'm done. So, like I said, started this morning, just trying to make you think a little bit. Just go home and be like, I did Mark J. I'm going to go home and I'm going to think about something he said. Or you could be like, you know what, he's stupid. I ain't going to think about nothing he said because he don't make no sense. But just learn for us to think for ourselves, think outside the box, do our own research, and come up with the conclusions that we think for ourselves to be right or wrong. And then, you know what you should do after that? Does it align with Jesus? That's the first thing we got to do. Because if it don't align with Jesus, it's probably not going to be right. So Our ministers, you can come on up now. And so if there's anybody here who are going through anything, any type of trials or anything in their life that you'd like to have the ministers come up and pray with you about, you're welcome to do so at this time. The doors of the church are open. And even if you're not going through anything, if there's something that you just want to pray about, if there's something like, hey, you know what? I've always thought this one particular way my whole life. I would like to be open to thinking a different way. But we come on, we pray about you, pray with you about it. Because sometimes we need a little prayer to have our minds open so we can think freely. That's a lot of sometimes we just don't do. We just do whatever it is and then we just do it and there's no prayer involved. So the doors of the church are open for anybody that'd like to come up and receive prayer.